All right, now let's talk about applying validation rules. Let's say as part of submitting the form, we want to make sure that the user enters a value for the name field, and the value is at least 3 characters long. So back to our code, this is where we are registering the name field. As the second argument, we can pass an object, and in this object, we can add the standard HTML attributes for data validation. For example, we can set required to true and min length to 3. We also have max length. Now, if we try to submit the form, look, we no longer see the person object here because React Hook Form only calls our handler function if the form is valid. So at this point, we want to show an error message to the user. So we go to this object and grab a property called form state. Before going further, let's log this on the console to see what we have in this object. So look, in this object, we have properties like errors, is dirty, is loading, is valid, is validating, and so on. So let's log form state.errors to have a better understanding of the errors object. All right, initially we don't have any errors, but if we submit the form without supplying a name, now we have an error for the name field, and the type of this error is required. Now if I type 1 character, now we get another object. In this object, we have an error for the name field, and the type of this error is min length. So we can use this object to show validation messages to the user. So right after our input field, we add a paragraph, and here we type an error like the name field is required. Now we want to show this only if there is an error for the name field and the type of the error is required. So we wrap this in braces, and here we type an expression. Now here we need to access the errors object. So we can say form state.errors, but because we're going to repeat this several times in this markup, it's better to destructure form state and grab the errors property on the top. So let me remove this so the error goes away. Now back to the top. So we want to destructure the form state property right here. To do that, we type a colon, and in braces, we destructure it and grab the errors property. This is nested destructuring in JavaScript, okay? Now let's remove this line, okay? So we have the errors object. Now back to our paragraph. We're going to type an expression. We want to render this if errors has a property called name, and in this property, the type is equal to required. So if this expression is true, then we want to render this paragraph. Now this question mark and a period is called optional chaining in JavaScript. The reason we need a question mark here is because our errors object can be empty. So if we don't have a name property and then we try to access the type property, we're going to get a runtime error. To prevent this, we use optional chaining. So this expression is evaluated only if we have a property called name in the errors object. Otherwise, it's ignored, okay? Now, similarly, we need another error message if the name is too short. So we add a paragraph and say the name must be at least 3 characters. And once again, we want to render this dynamically if we have an error for the name field and the type of the error is min length. Okay, so let's submit the form. Here's our error message. The moment I start typing a character, the error message changes to the name must be at least 3 characters. If I type 2 more characters, the error goes away. If I remove a character, the error comes back. All this functionality is baked into React Hook Form. Imagine if we wanted to implement this functionality for every field in every form. That would be a lot of work, right? So our error message is working, but it's better to make it red. To do that, we use another utility class in Bootstrap. So we're going to give this a class of text-danger. This makes the text red. Let's apply it here as well. Text-danger. Good. And here's what we get. Now, one last thing before we finish this lesson. Currently, if we type errors dot, we cannot see the name of our input fields because the TypeScript compiler is not aware of our input fields. To improve this and provide a better development experience as well as type safety, we can use an interface to define the shape of this form. So on the top, outside of our component, we use an interface to define the shape of this form. We call this interface form data. We can call it anything, but form data is a common name. Here we can say that in our form, we have 2 fields. name, which is a string, and age, which is a number. Now, when calling the form hook, here in angle brackets, we pass our interface, form data. Let me save the changes so the code is reformatted. Okay, that is better. So we call the form hook and pass the interface that represents the shape of this form. With this, when we type errors dot, we can see our input fields in the auto completion box.